Welcome to Twists of Life, where every story has an unexpected turn. Stories of joy and sorrow, hope and redemption, just like the life we all live. Make yourself comfortable. It's time to begin. Morning sunbeams slipped through the gaps in the thick curtains, filling the room with soft light. The weather, it seemed, had finally relented after a whole week of bad weather, promising a clear day. Eleanor Smith stretched sweetly, opened her eyes, and a slight smile appeared on her lips. She turned her head, intending to wake Arthur, but his place beside her was already empty. From the kitchen came the faint, inviting smell of freshly brewed coffee. There is something special about the morning aroma of this drink. It always seems the most delicious. Eleanor Smith certainly had good reason to be anxious. Her son was due to arrive today, and not alone. Nicholas had called the day before, saying he would arrive on the weekend, and he would have a girl with him. For the parents, this was the first news that their son even had anyone in his life. But Nicholas added that this wasn't just a girlfriend, but his fiancée, and things were very serious between them. The news was a complete surprise. They had no idea that their 21-year-old son would decide to get married so early. However, they weren't going to object or talk him out of it, remembering that they themselves had married while still in their 5th year of university. The next call from Nicholas informed them that he and Catherine were already on their way and would be in the city by about 5 in the evening. Eleanor Smith had booked a table at a restaurant in advance. At first, she thought of cooking dinner herself, but then decided that such an event required a special approach, and going to a restaurant would be appropriate. Their family lived quite modestly, belonging to the middle class. They could afford a lot, but tried not to spend unnecessarily. In recent years, a significant part of their budget went towards Nicholas's university tuition, and they were also saving up to buy him an apartment. "The children will be here around 5. Will you meet them?" Eleanor asked her husband. "I need time to do my hair. Otherwise, I won't be ready." "Of course I'll meet them." "Oh, stop worrying so much. It's not royalty coming to visit." Arthur Smith tried to dispel her anxiety. But Eleanor Smith still couldn't calm down. She didn't know how the meeting with her son's fiancée would go. There seemed to be no reason to worry, but for some reason, it only intensified. Around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Eleanor Smith called the restaurant to clarify the details of the upcoming dinner. Putting down the phone, she looked at her reflection in the mirror and thought about how quickly time flies. It seemed like only recently Nicky was taking his first steps, then he went to school. And now he was coming to visit with his fiancée. And perhaps this girl would indeed become his wife. And then they would have children. Her grandchildren. "Grandchildren," she repeated aloud. "What grandchildren? I'm only 43. She was horrified by the sudden thought. Theoretically, I can still become a mother myself, and here I am, immediately a grandmother. Her thoughts were interrupted by a phone call. It was Nicholas calling again. "Yes, son?" "Hello, this is not your son. This is an ambulance doctor. We are currently taking your son to the hospital. The route taxi he was in was involved in a road traffic accident," an unpleasant male voice said into the receiver. Eleanor Smith couldn't process what she had heard. What accident? Who is taking whom where? What nonsense? Only an hour ago she had spoken to Nicholas, and everything was perfectly fine. "Madam, can you hear me?" the voice repeated. "Excuse me. We are taking your son to the 5th City Hospital. Can you come? Who are you?" Her brain refused to accept reality. "Where is my Nicholas? I understand your state, but now you need to pull yourself together and come to the 5th City Hospital. The young man may need a blood transfusion." "Please hear me," the voice insisted. "Yes, we'll be right there," Eleanor said, completely exhausted, and hung up. She looked at her reflection in the mirror, and it seemed her face had suddenly aged 10 years, no less. Her husband entered the room. "Who were you talking to?" Nicholas called again. "He must miss you. Don't worry. You'll see each other soon. Then you can talk your fill." Arthur Smith smiled, and only now noticed the state of stupor his wife was in. "Arthur, we need to go to the 5th hospital immediately. They're taking him there," Eleanor whispered almost inaudibly. "Who are they taking to the hospital?" "Nicholas," Eleanor replied just as quietly. "Why to the hospital?" Arthur didn't understand anything. "Accident," was all Eleanor could manage to say, and suddenly she jumped up sharply, starting to rush around the room. She snatched clothes from the wardrobe, throwing them onto the floor. "Ellie, wait, please, calm down. I don't understand anything at all. What happened?" "He'll need a blood transfusion." She suddenly froze in the middle of the room. "That means it's very bad, doesn't it?" Eleanor looked pleadingly at her husband, wanting to hear that it wasn't so, that it was just a formality, or something like that. But Arthur was silent. His face changed abruptly. He walked over to his wife, hugged her tightly, and said quietly, "Pull yourself together. Now more than ever, you need to compose yourself. We must go to the hospital. Find out what's wrong with Nicholas. Please, focus." Eleanor looked at her husband and meekly went to get dressed. Something unimaginable was happening in the emergency room. Many people, shouting, gurneys with injured people. Someone was crying. Medical staff moved hurriedly. Eleanor held tightly onto her husband's hand, afraid of losing consciousness. "Do you see Nicholas anywhere?" she asked Arthur. "No, I don't. We need to ask a nurse. She should know." Arthur resolutely headed towards a nurse who was trying to calm a sobbing woman. "Excuse me, nurse. We were informed that our son was brought here. Can we find out about his condition?" "Is he from the accident?" the nurse clarified. "Yes." "Then wait. The doctor will come out shortly and call you." Arthur returned to Eleanor and told her they would be called soon. But about half an hour passed, and the doctor still hadn't appeared. Arthur was about to go back to the nurse when suddenly a doctor emerged from somewhere and asked loudly, "Smith here?" "Yes, that's us," Arthur shouted and pulled Eleanor towards the doctor. "Come into my office," the doctor invited and quickly strode down the corridor. They entered the office. Arthur helped Eleanor sit on a chair while he sat on the couch. "Doctor, tell us, what's wrong with Nicholas?" Arthur asked. "I'll be direct. The situation is difficult. Your son was sitting in the front seat of the route taxi. He took the brunt of it. Fracture of the right clavicle, 2 ribs on the right, a hairline fracture of the tibia. But all that is secondary." The doctor paused, looking questioningly at Eleanor. "Is your wife in a state to take in information? Speak. She's in shock. The main problem is a fracture of the base of the skull and a severe concussion. We've sent the young man for an MRI to assess the state of his brain. The biggest danger right now is possible hematomas. What should we do? Can we help in any way? Maybe you need money? Name any amount, we'll find it." "No, nothing is needed for now. The only thing you can and must do now is pray. Everything else is our job." "I understand. We'll wait for news," Arthur said quietly, looked at the doctor, and added, "Save him, please. We are doing everything possible, believe me." "And Catherine?" Eleanor suddenly asked. "There was a girl with him, Catherine, his fiancée. What about her?" The doctor shifted his gaze from Arthur to Eleanor. "I don't know anything about Catherine. You'll need to check with the nurse." Arthur led Eleanor towards the office door. She could barely move her legs. A passing nurse offered to give her a sedative injection. "Yes, please do. Maybe it will help her feel a little better," Arthur agreed. After the injection, Eleanor did indeed become a little calmer. "Arthur, did the doctor say when to expect any results?" she asked her husband. "He said to wait. And we need to find out about Catherine." "Yes, that's right. The girl was probably also injured. We need to inform her parents," Arthur agreed. He went over to the nurse to find out the girl's condition. "Excuse me, but the girl died. She was the only fatality in this accident." "I'm sorry," the nurse replied and moved away from Arthur. She looked as if she herself was to blame for what had happened. Arthur was completely stunned. He couldn't imagine how to tell Eleanor. She was only just starting to recover from the initial shock. He approached the nurse again. "Excuse me, do you know where she was taken? She must have had a phone. We need to contact her parents somehow." "Don't worry, the police will handle that." "Yes, of course." Arthur returned to Eleanor, who was meanwhile talking to another woman. That woman's husband was also in the route taxi, injured, but not as seriously. "Did you find out about Catherine?" Eleanor turned to her husband as he approached. Arthur shook his head negatively. "How? They brought her here, didn't they?" Arthur looked at his wife, not daring to tell the truth. "No, they took her to the 9th. Yes, the injured were divided. Some here, some to the 9th, the woman said. Arthur breathed a sigh of relief. He would definitely tell Eleanor about Catherine, but definitely not now. Closer to 10 in the evening, the doctor came out again and called Arthur. His appearance did not bode well. Arthur understood that the doctor would not deliver any comforting news. "I have bad news," the doctor began. Arthur tried to read the name on the badge, but the letters blurred before his eyes. "Doctor, please, tell me what's wrong with my son. Waiting and uncertainty are the worst." "He's alive. Yes, he's alive. But the head injury is very serious." "And what can be done? Is it treatable?" "You see, right now we are helpless. The situation is extremely unusual. An operation is too risky. He might not survive it. The only thing we can do now is support his vital functions." "How long do we wait?" "At least a couple of days. Then we'll see how things progress." "And what should we do? Go home?" "You won't be allowed to see him now anyway. Try to calm your wife down. She needs rest. And come back tomorrow around 11. There's no point in coming earlier." "Okay, I understand. Thank you." Arthur had a hard time persuading Eleanor to go home. She categorically refused. "What if he gets worse and we're not here?" "Listen, we can't help him here. The doctors are here. They're controlling everything. And you need to get some rest. Please don't be stubborn. Let's go home. We'll come back tomorrow," the doctor said, around 11. 3 weeks passed. During this time, the situation had barely changed. Nicholas was still in a critical condition, in an induced coma. Eleanor Smith was deeply affected by the news of Catherine's death. She couldn't imagine how she would tell her son about it when he woke up. Today, Eleanor arrived at the hospital to see her son only by lunchtime. She had been urgently called into work. She worked as a designer in a small firm. She had managed to arrange with her manager to take a month's leave earlier than planned, but circumstances demanded it. For some reason, Eleanor was sure that Nicholas would soon recover, and then he would need her constant help and care. But Nicholas's attending physician, Dr. Owen Davies, just shrugged, repeating that they had to wait. What exactly they were waiting for, the parents didn't understand. Their son just lay there with no visible improvement, and the doctors seemed to be doing nothing. Eleanor Smith resolutely knocked on Dr. Owen Davies's office door. "May I come in?" she asked, opening the door slightly. "Yes, come in, of course." The doctor stood up from his desk and sat on the couch, inviting Eleanor Smith to sit beside him. "We need to talk seriously, Dr. Davies. Tell me honestly, what should we do? What are Nicholas's chances? We can't just sit idly by and wait. You must understand my state." "I understand, but I can't offer anything new yet. Unfortunately, we are not in the capital. In this condition, no one will allow your son to be transported such a distance. I understand that too. But how much longer should we wait? And most importantly, for what? Are there any real prospects for my son to come out of this state anytime soon?" Eleanor Smith, I cannot give any guarantees or promises. Understand, medicine, although a precise science, has room for inexplicable things, for a miracle, if you will. And, well, I believe in this miracle because medically, we can't do anything more. Can I visit him? Of course you can. Why do you ask? Eleanor Smith left the office and headed to her son's ward. Nicholas lay on the bed, exactly as he had yesterday and a week ago. Eleanor sat down beside him, took his hand. Scenes from the past flashed before her eyes. Little Nicky, a trip to the dolphinarium where he swam with dolphins. How he won a swimming competition and took first place in the region. She wanted to cry, but there were simply no tears left. In these 3 terrible weeks, she had cried out everything she could. At that moment, a wild, uncontrollable despair seized Eleanor. Her hands trembled, her legs felt like cotton, her vision blurred. She felt like she was about to lose consciousness. Eleanor sharply stood up from the chair, almost fell, but managed to grab the edge of the bed and sink back onto the seat. Something must be done, a thought echoed in her head. But what? The poor mother didn't know where to run or whom to turn to. Exiting the hospital gates, she slowly trudged towards home. Suddenly, she desperately craved coffee, the smell of which wafted from a nearby cafe on the street. She resolutely turned towards it. Entering inside, Eleanor saw that all the tables were occupied by couples and felt disappointed. Just as she was about to leave, she noticed a man sitting alone in the far corner. Well, I won't bother him much if I just quickly drink my coffee and leave, Eleanor thought, and confidently walked towards the table. Excuse me, is this seat taken? May I sit at your table? I won't be long. I'll just have a cup of coffee and leave, she addressed the man who was carefully studying some papers. The man turned and almost dropped his documents in surprise. Ellie! Eleanor stared at him, puzzled. How does he know me? The thought flashed. Yes. I'm sorry. Do we know each other? Eleanor clarified. Ellie, don't you recognize me? The man smiled. Eleanor began to examine him more closely. He looked about 40-45, wore respectable expensive glasses, had a thick head of black hair touched with gray. He was dressed very expensively. Among her acquaintances and friends, there were no people of such wealth. Maybe a former client? Eleanor thought and said aloud, No, I'm sorry. Did you come to us for a design project? No, not at all, the man smiled, and Eleanor immediately appreciated his perfect white teeth. Come on, sit down, sit down. Eleanor sat down, bewildered. She felt a little awkward that she didn't recognize the person in front of her. So, how do you know me? We were at the same institute. I was just a year ahead. Pat? Paul Grant. Don't you remember? Pat? To say Eleanor was surprised was an understatement. I would never have recognized you, honestly. I must have changed. Hopefully for the better, Paul smiled. Of course. I'm so happy to see you. And how did you end up here? Didn't you transfer and leave? Yes, I left. I came to your city on company business. Decided to walk around the old places, have a good coffee, sit and reminisce, and look over some documents at the same time. And then this meeting. Fate, I guess. He exuded incredible positive energy. Even in her depressed state, Eleanor felt it. Paul noticed her mood. Did something happen? You seem very upset. Oh, Pat, better not ask. And quite unexpectedly for herself, Eleanor suddenly burst into loud, bitter tears. Can I help in any way? Her old acquaintance asked. No, Pat. No one can help me now. Only higher powers. Something terrible has happened. And to her surprise, Eleanor recounted the events of the past month to Paul. For some reason, it was very easy for her to talk to him. She even stopped crying and was able to speak quite calmly. It was strange. Eleanor, usually reserved, was sharing her sorrow with a person who was essentially a stranger. Yes, they had studied together once, perhaps even been friends. But so many years had passed that it felt like it was in a past life. And at such meetings, people usually exchange pleasantries, not talk about personal problems. Paul listened very attentively, without interrupting once, and only when Eleanor finished, he asked a completely unexpected question. Ellie, does Nicholas have a father? Eleanor looked at Paul in surprise. Yes, of course. Why? Are you living together? Paul continued his strange questions. Yes, we're married. Why are you asking? It just always seemed to me that a father should fight for his child until the end. And where is your husband? Why are you walking around the city alone in such a state? I noticed immediately that you were very down. He's at work, Eleanor replied sadly and quietly. She had nothing more to say. It was unbearably painful for her at that moment. She had asked herself the same questions many times and was sure that Arthur would actively seek a solution. But he had somehow withdrawn, said he couldn't do anything. She felt ashamed. Ashamed to admit that in 23 years of marriage, her husband had never made an independent decision, never shown initiative. Everything was always done, decided, achieved by Eleanor, and she was very tired of it. For a while after they got married, she hoped Arthur would change, that he was just young. But years passed. Nicholas was born, and for several years, Eleanor hardly noticed her husband's indecisiveness and spinelessness. But then these traits began to show more and more clearly. They argued about it. Eleanor tried to influence him, but to no avail, and she simply resigned herself. But now was precisely the moment when his inaction and unwillingness to act simply drove her mad. And Eleanor understood that she would have to take everything upon herself again. Otherwise, no one would save Nicholas. Ellie, don't despair. I believe your Nicholas will definitely recover. Where did you say this amazing Elijah lives? Eleanor named the village. I don't know which region it's in yet, but someone should call me this evening and tell me how to get there. Okay, calm down. We won't wait until evening, Paul said confidently, took out his phone, and spoke into it. Isaac, please find out which region the village of is in, and call me back in a couple of minutes. Paul's phone rang, and Isaac provided all the necessary information. Eleanor stared at Paul, stunned. Tell me, can you get time off work for a couple of days by phone so we don't waste time and leave right now? I'm on leave starting today, she replied slowly and quietly. She looked at her old acquaintance with such surprise that it took her breath away. But I need to pack at least some things for the trip. What things? We'll buy everything you need on the way, Paul said clearly and businesslike. Look, if we leave immediately, we'll be there by midnight. Although, no, right now. So, first he put on a show, and now he's backing down, she thought sadly. Pat, I understand everything. You have your own business. I'll get there myself by train or bus. Transport runs. You've already helped me a lot by finding out the region. Thank you. No, we can't leave right now, because we haven't finished our coffee, Paul smiled. You'll finish it. Oh, you're something, she smiled. What about your business? Ellie, dear, my business can wait. I have people to work. The main thing is to keep my finger on the pulse. That is, to be in touch. Don't even think about it. Finish your coffee calmly, and we'll go. They finished their coffee and left the cafe. Paul walked to his car, and Eleanor was surprised again. A luxurious business-class car stood before her. Even if we sell our apartment and car, we won't have enough money, Eleanor somehow thought. Please. Paul opened the front passenger door and gestured for Eleanor to get in. Thank you. You have a very beautiful car. Yes, I like it too, he smiled back. Wait, don't you need to call anyone? Tell them you've left? No, I don't. What about your parents? My dad died a year ago, and my mom followed soon after. So besides my husband and son, I have no close relatives. Although it's hard to call my husband close now, especially now. I'm sorry. Please accept my condolences about your parents. It's okay. I've already gotten through it. Although, of course, it's hard without parental support. I understand. My parents also passed away one after another 7 years ago. First my mother, and 6 months later my father. It's very difficult. Yes, Eleanor said, and looked somewhere into the distance. They drove in silence for about 10 minutes. Each was thinking their own thoughts. But Eleanor was sure that Paul, like her, was thinking about his parents right now. That wound never fully heals. Around 2300 hours, they entered a town not far from the needed village. Paul suggested staying in the town for the night, as going to the village at that hour would be inappropriate. They found a small cozy hotel and rented 2 adjacent single rooms. Do you want to eat? Paul asked. I don't even know. Kind of yes, but not really. Let's have a glass of wine and a light salad and go to sleep. We need to get up early tomorrow. Yes, I agree. Wine will help me relax and fall asleep. Then go up to your room. I'll be there soon. Paul arrived about 40 minutes later. Eleanor had managed to take a shower and change into a hotel robe. I found out everything about this Elijah. The receptionist was very talkative. She explained everything in detail. You need to go to him at 8 in the morning. He doesn't receive people earlier. But you have to get there before sunset. He doesn't receive people after that either. So I suggest we leave for the village at 7. There's sure to be a queue there. People come to him not only from all over the country, but also from neighboring states. It's not guaranteed that we'll get in on the first try tomorrow. The receptionist said some people wait for 3 or 4 days. Wow. I hope we haven't come for nothing, and he really can help Nicholas. There was a knock at the door, and a young man of about 19 entered the room with a tray laden with food. He carefully placed it on the table, wished them a pleasant meal and rest, and left. After a light dinner, the conversation resumed, but Eleanor looked at her phone. Europa's 05, 1 in the morning. Arthur hadn't called once. Does he really not care at all? She was almost asleep when she heard a message notification in the messenger. Eleanor picked up her phone and read, Do you have a conscience? Did you see what time it is? Is this your revenge? She wanted to reply, but changed her mind, muted her phone, turned on to her other side, and fell asleep. At 6 in the morning, they arrived at Elijah's house. He came out literally a minute later, carrying a small suitcase in his hand. Approaching the car, the healer greeted them and briskly got into the back seat. Perhaps you would like to sit in the front. I can give you my seat, Eleanor offered. Thank you, no need. I'm not used to taking someone else's place, and this place is yours. A wife should always be next to her husband, Elijah remarked. But we're not husband and wife, Eleanor objected. This is Elijah. Paul looked at Elijah, then at Eleanor, and just smiled. He liked this peculiar man more and more. They arrived at the hospital where Nicholas was staying at almost 5 in the evening. Fortunately, Dr. Owen Davies was there and immediately received Eleanor in his office. Good afternoon. I've brought this amazing man, and I insist that he examine Nicholas right now, Eleanor began from the doorway. Then let's go to the ward, said Dr. Owen Davies. Eleanor, Elijah, and Dr. Owen Davies entered the ward. Nicholas lay in the same position as before. Elijah immediately went to Nicholas's bed, gesturing for them to stay by the door. Approaching the young man, he first looked at him for several minutes, then took his hand and placed his own palm on it. It seemed to Eleanor that an hour had passed, no less. In reality, it was no more than 5 minutes. Leave me alone with the young man for about 40 minutes, Elijah requested. What are you going to do? The doctor clarified. Don't worry, nothing dangerous or supernatural. I just need to be with him alone. Please, I beg you. Eleanor intervened in the conversation. Dr. Davies, let's go out. Let Elijah be with our son. As a mother, I don't object. Yes, of course. It certainly won't get any worse, the doctor agreed. Those 40 minutes were the longest in her life. It felt like an eternity had passed. The waiting was simply unbearable. It's true what they say. It's better to chase than to wait. Inaction and not understanding what was happening completely threw her off balance. Finally, the door to the ward opened, and Elijah emerged. He looked very strange. It felt as if he had aged before their eyes. Eleanor stared at the healer, stunned. What happened in there that he changed so much, she thought. But she asked aloud, "Tell me, does he have even a tiny chance of pulling through?" Eleanor looked at the healer pleadingly. Dr. Owen Davies also asked with hope in his voice, "Well, are there chances for the young man?" "He will be fine. I need a bed in your hospital for 3 days. Can you arrange that? Or do I need to break something myself?" Elijah asked the doctor. "I think we can figure something out. Don't worry. And are you sure about your conclusion? Can he really recover?" "Not can, but will recover. He will start getting better very soon." Dr. Owen Davies went to find Elijah a free bed in a ward. Elijah looked into Eleanor's eyes. "Why are you looking at me like that? I already said, everything will be fine. So let's do this. You go home now, take a shower, and go to sleep. Tomorrow, please don't come here. Your help won't be needed. But the day after tomorrow, you need to come to the hospital no later than—" He calculated something in his mind. "No later than 11. "Of course, I can come at 7, Eleanor immediately agreed. "Did I say 7? No. Come at 9. That will be the best time." "I'll come. I'll definitely come. Thank you from the bottom of my weary soul." Eleanor had already moved away from Elijah and was heading towards the exit when she suddenly heard his voice. "Soon your soul will sing, not suffer. You'll see," he said promisingly. But Eleanor didn't believe it. Paul waited patiently for Eleanor outside the hospital. "Well, what did he say?" Paul asked with sincere sympathy. "He said he can help. He needs 3 days. He told me not to come to the hospital tomorrow, but to come the day after tomorrow at 9 in the morning. My God, how will you get through these day and a half?" Paul sympathized. "Honestly, I have no idea. Are you going home now? Or maybe you'll stay at the hotel and leave tomorrow morning?" Eleanor asked. "What do you mean? I'll leave tomorrow morning. I'll leave you alone in this state? Who do you take me for?" "But you've already spent so much time on me. I feel awkward," Eleanor admitted honestly. "Now that was really hurtful." Paul pretended to be offended. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. But—" Eleanor looked away. "Can I stay at your hotel tonight? I don't want to go home." "Of course you can." "Why are you asking?" "I'm just terribly hungry. Let's go quickly." Paul smiled. They got into the car and drove to the hotel. The good hotel was only a 10-minute drive from the hospital. Paul rented 2 adjacent rooms and ordered dinner to the room. "You won't mind having dinner in the room?" he asked Eleanor. "Can I ask a question in return?" Eleanor asked, blushing and feeling shy. "Of course you can." "I'll take a shower and be in a robe. I don't have the strength to stay in this suit anymore." "Of course you can. Do whatever is comfortable for you. It's fine." When Eleanor came out of the shower, the table was already set. Paul had ordered so much food that it could feed 10 people. "I think I overdid it." "You're just hungry. That often happens when you're craving food." "Well, it's not a big deal. We'll eat the most delicious things." They talked until 2 in the morning, despite their terrible fatigue, which was not so much physical as emotional. Eleanor didn't want to sleep at all. She felt incredibly calm and comfortable in Paul's company. They talked about some nonsense, recalled funny stories from their lives. Paul saw how much Eleanor was worried about her son and tried his best to distract her from these thoughts. He admired the courage of this strong woman. Not every man is capable of enduring difficulties and blows of fate so steadfastly. And here, seemingly, a weak woman. Although from his own experience, Paul knew that women are much stronger and more resilient than men, and who came up with calling them the weaker sex, he sincerely did not understand. Eleanor fell asleep in Paul's hotel room. He felt sorry to wake the woman he loved, and he carefully carried her to his bed, while he lay down on the small sofa. In the morning, they went to the hospital to see Nicholas. Exactly at 9, as Elijah had said. Dr. Owen Davies met them at the entrance to the ward, and seeing him, Eleanor was afraid that something had happened during that time, and immediately scolded herself for allowing herself to relax. What? What happened? She rushed to the doctor. Calm down, Eleanor Smith. Everything is fine. Even better. Nicholas has regained consciousness. How? He regained consciousness in less than 2 days? Eleanor couldn't believe what she heard. Can I see my son? Does he understand where he is and what happened? Calm down. He's fine. Especially his head. You can see him. He's waiting for you. Eleanor didn't walk. She flew into Nicholas's ward. Nicholas was sitting on the bed, and Elijah was sitting next to him on a chair. Son, Nicholas, my darling. She started kissing and hugging him, not believing her own eyes. How are you? Can you talk? Mom, don't worry. I'm fine. I'll get better soon. Elijah. Eleanor wanted to kiss Elijah, but understood that it would be inappropriate. She fell to her knees before him and began to thank him. Elijah, not expecting this, lifted Eleanor from the floor and sat her on the chair. Eleanor, stop it. Really. You're embarrassing me. I don't know how to thank you. You saved my son. Tell me, how much do I owe you? I forgot to ask about the amount. Listen to me. You need to calm down a bit. I'll step out now and leave you alone with Nicholas. He needs to tell you something important. And then we'll talk. Agreed? Yes, of course. Son, what do you need to tell me? Something bad, right? Mommy, stop it. I told you. Everything is fine. Listen, just don't worry and don't be scared. When I was in a coma, Catherine came to me. He saw that his mother was about to say something, stopped her, and continued. Yes, I know she died. Don't interrupt. She asked that when you have a daughter, you name her Kathy, in memory of Catherine. Her passport name is Catherine, but she was baptized as Catherine, you understand? Eleanor didn't understand anything at all. It even seemed to her that her son had problems with his head. Son, does your head hurt? No, Mommy, my head doesn't hurt. Promise you'll name your sister Kathy, please. It's important for her and for me. But I'm not planning on having a baby. I'm 43, if you remember. You're not planning, but you will, Nicholas remarked calmly. I don't understand anything. And also, I know you're divorcing Dad, so you don't worry. I'll tell you right away. I'm not against it. I'm with you. Eleanor stared at Nicholas, stunned. He loved his father and was almost always on his side. What happened? Why such changes? What caused this? Eleanor felt like she was dreaming. Nicholas, what about Dad? You always said you'd never forgive us if we divorced. Mom, that was when I was a child. I've grown up, and now I see many things differently. I know Dad never came to my ward while I was in a coma. I know everything he did and said. I know what you did. I saw and heard everything. Mommy, I beg you, be truly happy, as a woman. I won't stop communicating with Dad. He's my father, whatever he may be, and he taught me a lot. But I want you to be happy, because I love you. And now I know that for sure. Eleanor was crying again. Tears streamed down her face. To hear such words from her own child, her adult son, who had essentially been to the other side, was incredibly moving and touching. Eleanor Smith hugged Nicholas and kissed him on the cheek. "Son, I love you very much. Very much. Thank you so much for those words. We'll get through this." Dr. Owen Davies entered the ward and said that Nicholas was being taken for an MRI. The results of the examination amazed even experienced doctors. The hematomas in Nicholas's head had miraculously disappeared. The fractures had almost healed, and now he only needed rehabilitation without surgery. "Well, you know, Elijah, I've seen a lot in my life, but this—" Dr. Owen Davies turned to Elijah. "I don't even know how to comment on this. I only have one question. If I ever have medically hopeless patients in my practice, can I send them to you?" "You can. I help everyone I can," Elijah replied. "But it's not always like this. Sometimes a person cannot recover because they themselves don't want to. Then no one can help." Eleanor stood aside, patiently waiting for them to finish their conversation. Elijah moved away from Dr. Owen Davies and looked intently at the woman. "Do you want to ask something?" he asked, smiling. "No," Eleanor lied, although she really wanted to ask Elijah about the pregnancy Nicholas had mentioned. "But I think you're deceiving me. You wanted to thank me for saving your son. How much do I owe you?" Elijah's face changed slightly, and he shook his head reproachfully. "Do you think everything is always measured in money?" "No, of course." Eleanor felt awkward. She felt guilty. What could money do? Where would you take it to give to God? "Well, that's different." "No, it's not different. I am God's messenger, and I do His work with my hands. He's just a little behind schedule." Elijah smiled somewhat sadly. "Are you sure you don't want to ask anything else?" Eleanor hesitated, thinking about what to do, and finally decided, "I do. Tell me, am I doing the right thing by leaving my husband in the past? What do you think yourself? Or how do you feel? What do you want?" "I want to be happy." "And what do you need for that? Or rather, who?" "Another man. Not your husband. You see, you know everything yourself. Why do you ask me? And also," Eleanor wanted to sink through the floor. It seemed to her that asking about pregnancy at 43 was a bit late, especially from a stranger. But she decided. "Tell me, can I still get pregnant?" "No," Elijah replied honestly and directly. Tears welled up in Eleanor's eyes. "I wish I hadn't asked. At least, then there would have been some hope," Eleanor thought disappointedly. "You cannot get pregnant because you are already pregnant," Elijah smiled. "You always get upset before you hear the full answer." "Wait, how? Already? So, this is Arthur's child, your husband?" "No, no. This is the child of the man you came here with, your destined one. But that was just recently, and you're already sure I'm pregnant?" Eleanor was taken aback. "Does that happen?" "It happens. When people are destined to be together, they do foolish things their whole lives instead of living happily. In such cases, fate uses the slightest chance to bring such people together." "Incredible," was all Eleanor could say. "Thank you so much. We'll take you back home." "No need. Drive me to the train station, please. I have another journey, now that I'm in Russia. And take care of yourself and your family. That's the most important thing in life." Paul drove Elijah to the station and returned to the hospital. Eleanor spoke with Dr. Owen Davies and was surprised to hear that Nicholas might be discharged home at the beginning of the next week, but he would need to follow a regimen and do a set of exercises for a faster recovery. Eleanor went into her son's ward. Nicholas was sitting by the window, looking somewhere into the distance. "Son, what's wrong?" his mother asked, scared. "Nothing, Mommy. Everything's fine. I'm just sitting here thinking. Things like this happen in life. I was dying, almost died, and now I'm resurrected. If it weren't for you—" "Where did you even find this Elijah?" Eleanor told him where she had heard about him and where she had gone to bring him to the hospital. Yes, you know how to surprise me, Mommy. Nicholas, I'm going to leave now, and I'll come back first thing in the morning tomorrow, okay? I really need to talk to someone. With Paul. Did I say his name? No, but I know. Go, of course. I'll sleep. I really want to sleep. Nicholas kissed his mother goodbye and lay down in bed, and Eleanor hurried to Paul. She kept thinking about how to tell him the news and whether she should tell him now. Maybe she should be sure first? What if Elijah was mistaken? Paul was standing by the car, talking on the phone. Isaac, this needs to be done urgently. I can't live like this after all. Yes, we'll transfer. Well, it's not a big deal. Yes, I understand there are certain difficulties. Maybe, I'll definitely talk to her. Of course, let's keep in touch. Paul turned and saw Eleanor approaching. Hi, can you talk? They blurted out simultaneously and laughed. You go first, Paul offered. I'll yield to the woman I love. It's her right. Pat, let's not do it here. This isn't the place at all. Okay, then let's go. We'll eat and talk. It's not a quick conversation. It requires attention and calm. You're scaring me, Eleanor tensed. Don't worry. Nothing bad is happening. Everything is fine. Sitting at a table in the restaurant, Eleanor couldn't bring herself to start. Doubts about the correctness of such a step overwhelmed her. But Paul watched her attentively and waited. Ellie, my dear, I am, of course, a patient man, and I've waited for you for over 20 years. But let's speed things up a bit. What did you want to say? Eleanor couldn't think of anything better than to recount her conversation with Elijah today. Paul looked at Eleanor and didn't immediately understand what she was talking about. Are you saying I'm going to have a child? A real one? Eleanor laughed. Of course, a real one. What else? And most likely, it will be a girl. A girl. Daddy's little princess. It can't be. It can't be. Tears streamed from Paul's eyes. Eleanor had not expected this at all. A respectable adult man was crying like a child. Pat, what's wrong? Don't. You don't understand what this news means to me. I wanted a child so much. I always dreamed of a daughter. But to have one with the woman I love, I had almost lost hope. My only hope was to be with you, to win you over, to charm you. Well, never mind. But that you can give me a daughter. Today is the best day of my life. Eleanor was also crying by now. It was very touching and struck a chord. Having composed himself, Paul continued. So, I made the right decision. Now I'm absolutely sure of it, he began. Ellie, my dear, your divorce is a matter of time. I perfectly understand that now you are only mine, and I won't give you to anyone. But we need to solve one important question. Where will we live? What are the options? Eleanor smiled. She already understood that Paul would try to persuade her to move to his city, and she was ready for it. Look, we can buy a house in the Jubilee settlement, or a large duplex apartment on Pushkin Street. Which option do you like better? Paul named 2 elite districts in her city. She had no idea he would be willing to move here. Wait, are you saying you're ready to move to this city for me and abandon your business? She didn't believe him. No one is going to abandon the business. We need something to live on after all. But I'm ready to move anywhere for you, even to Siberia. Paul couldn't resist, jumped up from his seat and swept Eleanor into his arms. Gentlemen, I have the best wife in the world, he shouted across the restaurant. And I love her, and she's going to give me a daughter. The people present in the restaurant burst into applause. Someone shouted, Well done! Someone else, Congratulations! Eleanor blushed. Put me down. You're embarrassing me, Eleanor said quietly. You truly are my happiness. A week later, Nicholas was discharged from the hospital, and the 3 of them moved to Paul's city. He had a large house, and there was enough room for everyone. Nicholas decided to transfer, finish his studies in the same city, and live with his mother and stepfather. To Eleanor's great surprise, Nicholas quickly bonded with Paul, and they often went fishing together. Eleanor had no idea that her life would change so dramatically, that she would decide to become a mother for the second time, and that she would finally be truly married and simply a happy woman. And even less did she expect to meet the man she had been secretly in love with at the Institute so many years later. But she would tell him about that someday later,